Quincy, thank you so much for having me, man. I've tackled the secrets for your 20s. I've tackled the questions you need to ask in your 20s. Now I'm going after the lies we need to stop believing in our 20s. Here it is. I'm holding it right now. Comes out today. The reason I wrote this book is I just felt like I was overwhelmed and overcome with lies for most of my 20s. Lies like I'm a failure or I'm the only one struggling. Why is everybody doing better than me? I'm not good enough. Just all these mindset lies, all these lies that I believed for so many years, and I really thought they were true. And they were holding me back, they were keeping me stuck, they were keeping me miserable. So over the last decade, I've been researching and talking to 20 somethings all over the world and really trying to uncover, okay, what are the main core key lies that are holding people back, that are keeping people stuck? And how do we replace those with truth? How do we replace those with hope? Hope that we do have this future waiting there in front of us, even if we can't see it yet. So I'm really excited about this new book. I think it's the most important book that I've written yet. Good question. What did, man, seeing my book next to Oprah's at Target, that was pretty wild. I'm not gonna lie to you. At that point, it had been like a 13-year journey of, again, getting rejected by every publisher around, having publishers say, no, there's no market for this, or who are you to write this? Just getting rejected and rejected and rejected to finally getting a book published, 101 Secrets for 20s. And then another book, 101 Questions You Need to Ask in Your 20s, and start seeing things slowly build to then getting into Target a few years ago. So it wasn't like I just published a book and then I got into Target and then it blew up in Target. It was a slow build. But yeah, once I got into Target, it sold well in Target for a long period of time, and so that was really great, and that was a game changer. So to see my book next to other people that you've looked up to or that you've been reading about or watching for your whole life, yeah, that felt like a, yeah, this is working kind of moment. Like, yeah, maybe I can do this for a career. Maybe this is working after all. And it definitely felt like a good confirmation and affirmation that I was continuing on the right path. And I needed to keep writing this. I needed to keep doing this and talking about this. So again, that's why the new book, 25 Lies, 20 Somethings You Need to Stop Believing. That's why I'm still doing this. I'm still very passionate about this decade of life. I think it's so important. And I think we need to bring a lot of truth and hope into the hard parts, into the scary parts, and replace despair with hope. I know one story that Quincy, I know you've told me that you relate to and that you enjoyed hearing. It's from my book, 101 Secrets for Your 20s. But I tell the story of when I worked in a call center. And if anybody's worked in a call center, it's not the most enjoyable work in the world. I would get in at like 6 a.m., get on my phone, and right away people would be there waiting to yell at me about their life's problems and everything that I've done to ruin their life, even though I just showed up a minute ago to work. It was pretty tough. It was tough to get yelled at all day, every day. But right behind me, there was this sweet lady, and she was kind. We would talk during our little breaks that we would get in between getting yelled at. And she was this amazing chef. And she would make all these great meals and bring them in for, office birthday parties. And that was like the only time we'd all shut down the phones and be like, okay, let's just put them all on hold for 5 minutes. Nobody will care. Let's just eat some carrot cake. She was amazing. So I would talk to her about that. And I said, well, why didn't you pursue becoming a chef? Like, why are you here in this call center with me? Because there was one thing we all had in common in this call center is that we all hated our jobs. Like, that was the one rallying point. So I was asking her, why are you here? Why are you here with us? And she said, well, I did pursue becoming a chef at one point. I was working in a restaurant, and it was grueling, and it was just too hard. And I just wasn't able to support myself, and so I just had to give it up. And then that's when she gave me some advice when I was in my 20s, and she was giving me this sage advice, in her mind it was at least. She basically told me, Paul, at some point you're going to realize that you just have to put your childish dreams away, you got to put your grown-up pants on, and you just got to grow up. And for me, that just, my heart just sunk. Like that felt like terrible advice to me. Like, I didn't want to live my life living crappily ever after, I didn't want to be in this call center just thinking about and wishing and wondering about all the if onlys. If only I would have taken another chance. If only I would have worked harder. Only I would have risked. So I would say some of that was maybe some of the worst advice that I received. Obviously we all have to mature, we all have to grow up at certain points, but I don't think we should let our dreams die. I don't think we should just be comfortable with being crappy, living this crappily ever after life. So on the flip side, some of the best advice I've given, man, I've been given so much great advice in my life. One of those pieces of advice I think came from Seth Godin, who's one of my heroes. He's a best-selling author, speaker. He's just great guy. And I actually asked Seth for my book, 101 Questions You Need to Ask in Your 20s. I asked Seth, hey, what is the question that you feel like every 20-something should be asking? And Seth replied right away. And prefacing the email, I was a little bit nervous to email Seth because I'm like, I'm a nobody. Seth's a big shot. I don't want to email him and bother him. But I thought, well, I'd give it a shot. So I was very afraid when I emailed him, and it was like he was reading my mind because his advice was, what is fear holding you back from doing? Is it worth it? And I loved that. I loved especially the is it worth it piece. So whatever, we're all being held back again, and that's fear is that lie, of what if it doesn't work out? What if I fail? All these lies that we start telling ourselves when we're standing at the starting line. We haven't even taken that step. We have no idea what's even around the bend, but we're already calling ourselves a failure. But I loved Seth Godin's take on it of, is it worth it? Is it worth never knowing? Is it worth never starting? Is it worth not being able to help those people that are ahead that you need to be there for? But you let fear hold you back. You let fear stop you. So that was great advice. One of them that I feel like is very particular, obviously, to our generation, to the younger generations, is our social media addictions. You're watching this on social media right now. We're all on social media all the time. And so I have this lie in the book of I need to be constantly connected. And I call that out as a lie because I start diving into the effects of, what is this doing to us that we're on our phones like 7 hours, 8 hours, 10 hours a day? What is this doing to our mental health, emotional health, our well-being? Because this ties into another lie and another issue facing us today of this comparison, this constant comparison. And I call it obsessive comparison disorder, where we're constantly comparing our progress, our success, this image of success that we're portraying online with everybody else's image. And it's just tearing us down. I don't know if you can relate to that feeling, but you used to only have to go to your 10-year reunion to look everybody up and down to see who's doing better than whom, right? And you just had to fake it for one night. Rent the BMW, rent a spouse and some kids if you can do that, get a toupee, lose some weight, whatever it takes. Just fake it for one night that you have the best life out of everybody there. Well, now we're doing that kind of same phenomenon, that same charade every single day with every single post. It's obsessive comparison disorder. And so I think that's a unique struggle that is facing this generation is what do we do with that? How do we get over that lie? How do we find truth in celebrating other people's successes, celebrating our small steps on our journey instead of comparing our progress with everybody's filtered and kind of made up progress reports that we're posting online? So I would say those are the two of the biggest struggles that I see really facing this generation is obsessive connection disorder, where we're constantly connecting, always have to be on the phone, always have to be updated, and as well as obsessive comparison disorder, where we're constantly comparing ourselves. So those are big ones I think facing this generation today. And then another lie that feeds into that is I'm the only one struggling. And I think that's a big issue because the email I get the most from people is I feel so alone. I feel like I'm the only one struggling. And it's like, that's so wild that we could be constantly connected. We could be connected all over the world. I could be speaking to you from across the oceans, and yet we still feel alone. We still feel isolated. And I think it's because we're not having these vulnerable, authentic conversations to say, you know what, I'm struggling. Because too many of us are struggling to make it appear like we're not struggling. So we're losing those authentic conversations, and that's a big problem, leading to isolation and depression, when we all should just come out and say, hey, let's talk about this. You're not alone. I grew up in Colorado, so this was home to me. And then I went out to college to California, and I met my wife out there, Naomi, and we lived in Los Angeles for a while. We lived in San Diego for a while. And there's definitely a lot of pros about California. I mean, Hollywood, that's like what everybody looks up to. Until you get to Hollywood, like actual Hollywood, and you realize that Hollywood is the most un-Hollywood place in the world. Like, it's not glamorous whatsoever. It's pretty gritty and dirty. But anyway, I digress. But yeah, LA wasn't for me. The smog and the traffic, and you're driving 2 hours just to get 10 miles somewhere, and there was no kind of nature to go out to. I remember hiking above the Hollywood sign at Griffith Park, because that was like the one little spot of green grass anywhere and a little bit of a mountain I could go and just hike up and kind of get above it all. Sure, you couldn't really see the city down there because there was such a thick smog. He's like, what's down there? I can't even tell. And your lungs would be like burning by the time it was all said and done, because it was like putting your mouth up to like an exhaust pipe. I really do like LA to some extent. I don't want any LA hate mail here, but I do love Colorado. Lifestyle changes. It's just easier to do life here as a family. Obviously California is very expensive. I don't know if you guys can relate to wherever you're at right now, but we were hoping to buy a house. That just didn't seem feasible there. And then also, I just missed seasons. There's really not 4 distinct seasons in California, and I loved having that as a kid, going through summer and fall and winter and spring and all that comes with that. And I love getting to experience that with my kids now, where they get to experience the change. That weather is not always perfect. And I do think that seeps into the California mindset a little bit, where everything is perfect all the time, and when it rains just a little bit, like, everybody freaks out. It's like a tsunami hit, because there was like an inch of rain. So I do love Colorado, and I love getting to the Rocky Mountains and just being out in nature and hiking. Like, that's very therapeutic and life-giving for me. That was a huge honor when he endorsed my book, my first book, 101 Secrets of Your 20s. I can remember the moment. It was one of those moments where I didn't let fear hold me back when I asked him, hey, can you endorse my book? He didn't even know who I was. It was a total reach. And I sent that kind of email to a lot of other people that never responded. But Seth was so gracious, he responded right away. And I remember crawling after one of my kids in a tunnel, a little like play tunnel. And I remember seeing his email and like standing up right away and like having this tunnel hanging off of me and like shouting to my wife, like, Seth responded. He wants to endorse my book. I was so thrilled. But he's really right. I do feel like I'm kind of that older brother where I've been there, I've done that, and I've struggled a lot. And really my whole 20s was this giant struggle. I felt like I was this huge failure most of my 20s and my early 30s and other times in my life where I felt like, man, everybody is experiencing the success that I was supposed to. Like, when am I going to be successful? When is life going to turn out like it was supposed to? But I started learning through the struggle, even though it was difficult and hard, and I was getting rejected by every publisher around. I just couldn't get a yes. I don't know if you can relate to that feeling where you just can't get a yes from anybody. Like, I remember times I kept checking my email and asking friends if they would just send me an email just to make sure my email wasn't broken. Because I literally thought, it's broke, no one will respond to me. I felt miserable, but I learned that through the struggle, that's where I found my passion, and really that's where I found my purpose, in a sense. And a lot of people ask me that, Paul, how do I find my passion? How do I find my purpose? Well, I say, well, it's easy. Fail miserably at something, fail terribly, have it not work out at all like you thought, and yet the next day you want to do it again. The next day you want to try it. You want to keep after it because there's something really important in there for you. And I think a lot of times our passion and our purpose comes from our greatest pain and our greatest problems that we see. And we want to do something about them. So that really became a catalyst for me in all the books that I write. And I still write about this time in our life, this defining decade where we're facing all these huge life questions, whether that's in your teens, 20s, early 30s, 40s, because of that failure, of that experience and that struggle. It really was my catalyst for the work that I've been doing for the last decade. So I'm thankful for it now, even though it was extremely hard when I was going through it. My wife has been working in commercial acting. She used to be a financial advisor. Now she made a huge switch and now she's in commercial acting, just totally different career that she's loving. So basically life is extremely busy, extremely hectic, just constantly trying to navigate all the details of the day, all the kids, because for some reason kids need to eat to live, and they need shelter, and they need you to pick them up from school. They don't like, walking home in 10-degree weather while it's snowing because you've forgotten about them. So there's just a lot of details to constantly manage, and it's very busy. So I mean, right now, take for example, it's 9:30 at night, and I'm talking to you, Quincy, and I love doing that, but it can be exhausting at times because I'm just trying to find that space, find that place where I can get some work done, where there's quiet. Because if this was 5 o'clock at night right now, I would have had kids banging on the door, crying about something, trying to get to me, utter chaos all the time. So a lot of the times it just feels like you're managing chaos, and how do I create something really cool out of this chaos? Not always simple, new challenges as a parent, but really fun ones too. And it definitely makes you take advantage of the time you have, because you don't have a ton of that nowadays. I feel like the older we get and the more responsibilities we get, marriage or kids or house or careers, like time becomes more and more of a commodity. So whatever you want to pursue right now, like now's the time. Like it's never going to be easier than it is right now. It's only going to get harder, I feel like, only more complicated. So go ahead and pursue it now. That's a good one. That is a tough one for me because I think we all can relate to this, but definitely for myself, I'm constantly trying to be that source, and I can feel like, well, what am I drawing from? Like my cup can feel pretty dry at times. I can feel pretty worn out. I can feel burnt out. I can feel like I'm burning the candle, that wick. I'm burning it at both ends, and I'm burning my fingers every which way while I'm doing it. So two things. One, to answer this question, and I've written about this, that I've learned that I can't chase inspiration, so to speak. Like I can't wait to feel inspired before I jump into my work. Like even though I love what I'm doing and I love writing books and I find so much value and purpose from it, it still feels like work sometimes. Like writing a book is not just like this simple process for me. So I know sometimes I just have to sit down and start typing and jump into it. And then I know at some point, hopefully, I'll write something, I'll start getting into it, and the inspiration will start to come. So it's like you do the work first and then the inspiration follows, instead of waiting for all these moments of, oh, am I inspired? Oh, am I ready? Am I excited to do this work? Well, now let me go do it. So I think sometimes we have it off. But yet, I still do want to fill that cup with inspiration. I do want to fill that cup with joy and with hope and with truth and with good things. So reading books is huge for me. I love reading history books, for one, because it gives me a lot of perspective. It gives me a lot of great stories and stuff to chew on and wrestle with as I'm learning from other people's stories and other times in history. Because I think so much of our culture gets wrapped up in today, and we always think like the worst things are happening right now than ever. So I like to get that perspective. So that's a source of inspiration for me. And then also my faith, my faith in God and praying and having that connection, going to church if I can. Sometimes it's not always easy with kids and with the global pandemic, but going to church and just sitting in worship. I don't know if you guys experience in this, whatever religion you might be in, but those times of worship, and for me, worshiping God, that's huge. It just takes me out of my own head. It points me to bigger things. It reminds me that I'm not the sole center of the universe, and that somebody else is looking out for me, and so I don't have to feel like I have to do it all on my own. So yeah, faith for me is a big part of that source of inspiration for sure. I think we talk about transition so lightly, like I'm just going through a little bit of a transition, like, oh, it's nothing, no big deal, or it's a little bit of a change. But I think we've all come to see that, obviously change and transition, especially global change, global transition, we're all being affected by something right now. Like it's extremely hard. It's extremely difficult. But what I encourage people that I'm working with, and I try to look at this for myself too, is that instead of just, I think the habit that we get into is rushing through transition, rushing through change, because it's uncomfortable, it's ambiguous, nothing feels normal. So we just want to get to some place that feels sturdy again, that feels comfortable, some place that just seems known. Even if we're miserable there, at least we know what's coming, right? So I encourage people to, instead of rushing through transition, how do we make the transition and change matter? Because I don't think a transition or change is something to rush through just to get to some other next best season of your life. I think transitions and change are some of the most important seasons of your life. So the analogy that I use is a lot like transplanting a pot. You know, transplanting a tree from a pot, maybe even into the ground. And I don't know if you've done anything like this where the tree or the plant starts to outgrow the pot. And it starts to kill the tree because it has no room for the roots to grow. And so you are lovingly taking the tree out and you're planting it in the ground or into a larger pot. But those first, week or so, like it kind of is dicey. Like I know I always feel like, man, did I mess up? Because the tree starts drooping. It looks like it's not going to make it. Like it's a hard transition for that plant to go from the pot to the ground. And I think that's true for all of us. It's that same metaphor, and I really feel like, God cares about us too much to let us stay in that pot where we'll have no room to grow. Our roots can't go any deeper. And so he transitions us into some more, deeper ground. And it might be a hard transition. It might take time, but he wants that space for our roots to grow deeper so that we can be healthy and strong and ready to take on the next big change and transition. Thanks, Quincy, for having me on. This has been great talking to you. And man, you're one of my favorite people, so I'm glad we get to connect, even if it's across oceans through phones. I can't wait to connect with you in person someday soon. All right, thanks, Quincy.